I think you need to pay it forward in order for the next generation after you to become leaders themselves. I think that is one of the main goals, being a CEO, CIO, CTO, whatever your position is. Yes, you're supposed to mitigate risk and growth for the business, but another job that is not in your description is to create other leaders.
It feels good, right? Yo, I'm in the light at the end of the tunnel. Paper stacks, yeah, I got them in the bundles. Harry Potter breaking bread with the muggles. They said I wouldn't make it, now they looking puzzled. They said I wouldn't take it, how to go on hustle.
Renard, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Cool. Ty, you ready?
Always, Kev.
All right. Timeout. Tyler, who are we taking the timeout with today?
Well, Kev, good to see you, brother. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest today. We have Renard Henry, the head of IT at Toyota Connected of North America. He's from the dirty south of New Orleans, and now he's my Jiu-Jitsu buddy up here in the DFW. Renard, thanks for being on the show, and I wanted to ask you, what's a guy like Renard Henry do on a day off? I think I got a kickback email from you saying you're out of office today.
Oh yeah. On a day off, man, it's being on this podcast on a day off, man. One of the best things to do when you're off is be on this awesome podcast. So thank you for having me.
Right on. And Renard, let's just jump right into some knowledge talk, man. Like, can you kind of let us know what it was like growing up down there? What you were into as a young kid before you hit college? Who was Renard Henry before college?
Oh man, for me, back in the day, that's what I'm gonna say. Back in the day, I would say I was probably a quiet kid. Did play a lot of sports. I played basketball, football, baseball at one point in time. So I played every sport I probably could find. I thought like many other people playing football that I was going to try to make it to the NFL, but that didn't work out. I got injured in high school. So definitely, I always say it took a village to raise me. I was raised by my mom, my grandmother, grandfather, and my uncle for the most part. It was great. I definitely had my grandfather who was in the military. Learned a lot from him and moving forward, went to high school, did ROTC. Funny thing is I almost went to the military. So military almost happened. After I got out of high school, doing 4 years of Air Force ROTC, I went in there and they was like, hey, we're going to have to put you on a weight loss program. And in my teens going to my 20s, I was like, man, I'm not going to do that. I'm not doing that. So that didn't happen. I wound up going to Dillard University, which I always say the Dillard University. Great school. Definitely is where I started into my IT going forward. Did a lot of IT stuff before then in high school. Probably my first computer was a gateway computer. So that might show my age a little bit. But moved into college, and then, 2005 Hurricane Katrina hits. Oh. And when Hurricane Katrina hit, that's when I moved to Dallas after that. So I've been in Dallas for 20 years now. So this year will be another anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. And it was I was planning on moving anyway, and Katrina just made me move a little bit faster.
And Renard, I got to ask you a question, Renard, being a Razorback from Arkansas.
Okay.
Where do these athletes come from in Louisiana? Oh. My goodness. Like LSU, every year, the D-line, they're like running 4.4s at 270, 290. You guys just breed them down there? Because you're one step away from me.
I would say, yeah. Even when I played in high school, our offense and our defensive linemen were big. They looked like grown adults. Some of them already had beards already, mustaches. So, they look like grown adults, and still, if it depends where you live. If you live in Florida, Louisiana, I think Louisiana is big on defensive linemen, O-linemen. You can find them anywhere in Louisiana. So yeah, we're breeding them every day. LSU gets the pick of the litter every year, which I love LSU. Even though I didn't go there, but that's the college I watch all the time.
That's cool. You mentioned Katrina, and you mentioned kind of several moments, where that journey didn't go as planned. You had an idea, you had a thought. Can you go back to some of those moments? Because at the time you were going through that experience, it probably didn't make a lot of sense. Now that you get the opportunity to look backwards and kind of reflect, I guess, on those turning points, right, or those detours, what do you think you were meant to learn? Like, why do you think those things happen? And can you think of any other critical moments that kind of turned Renard into this black belt jiu-jitsu phenom?
And I would say a lot of mentorship helped along the way. When I was still in New Orleans, I worked at LSU Health Science Center. So that's the medical school for LSU. And I had a mentor there, Brian Birch, and this was when I was still in college. He sat me down and said, I'm going to teach you everything that I know. So it actually helped me in college, learning hands-on about technology and IT at the time. And so when I went to class, I was already ahead of the curve already for my classes already. So mentorship, it has helped me a lot. I've seen a lot of great mentors in my career, being in different industries. I've been in several different industries in my career and always have had great mentors, even though they might have not known they were a mentor. I watched them and observed how I wanted to be a leader going forward. So, going back to Katrina was a lot. I probably left with only 3 days worth of clothes at the time. So the resilience of my family and how we overcame that pushed me more to, I need to make sure that I find my own path at the time. I just graduated college and I had to figure something out. I was like, I can't go back home. I had no reason to go back home. So I had to forge my own path. So moving for the very first time to Dallas was a big eye opener for me. So, you got to think about it. You've been around your family your entire life. Family is big for me. And then you move on your own to a big city like Dallas. And, like I say, it's been 20 years later. I've learned, I've grown over time. I'm not the same person I was when I was in New Orleans. I'm not the same person I was probably 2 years ago. So I think having great mentors and keep growing and keep moving through your journey helps a lot to become where I am right now.
It's really cool. It's really cool. I forget the highway down there, but I know it's multiple lanes, like five lanes down by you guys. The only reason I remember, I was half asleep going to the airport. But if you were to pull up a billboard coming into whether it's down in Dallas or LSU or down in Louisiana, New Orleans, what's that phrase or that quote that you tend to replay in your mind?
And I say this a lot now, and I always say continue to inspire and continue to be inspired. And I think in leadership, you need to have that. You need to continue to inspire your team and other people who are outside of your team, and continue to be inspired by your team as well. I've got to work with some great people over the years, and they continue to inspire me to keep growing and continue to be better and continue to be a better leader for them, being 3 years at Toyota Connected. So I've got to, like I say, work with some awesome people throughout my career, and I'm continued to be inspired. I'll tell you one thing. I'm a lot of times I'm inspired outside of work. Jiu-Jitsu's big. Seeing my fiance who reads a lot, I started reading more because of her. And it was just watching her. I was like, man, she keeps picking up these books. Man, why are these books so great that she keeps picking up? So I picked up a book myself. I say, okay, I'm gonna see this. And now you talk to my 20-year-old self, I probably would have never picked up a book. I wasn't a avid reader. I started reading because I started watching her. I picked up one of the first leadership books. I picked up one book, turned into 20 turned into 40, and now I cannot stop picking up a book going forward. So I get inspired by just everyday people I meet at jiu-jitsu. And like I say, even family just inspires me to just keep improving and keep getting better.
That's really, yeah. And I heard that in you from all the mentors you had, but then kind of what you were sharing before we got on the show, how important it is to kind of share your lessons now with others. So, and I think that's really, really cool and needed, because I think sometimes we can get into that habit of just taking and then taking ownership of whatever we learn from a mentor. And That's where that slippery slope of ego starts.
Yeah, the ego. There's a saying we say in jiu-jitsu, especially at Machado's, it's leave your ego at the door. I think you need to pay it forward in order for the next generation after you to become leaders themselves. I think that is one of the main goals, being a CEO, CIO, CTO, whatever your position is. Yes, you're supposed to mitigate risk and growth for the business, but another job that is not in your description is to create other leaders. And that's something you need to do. I think if anyone doesn't do that and share the knowledge, I always think that's an ego thing. I think they think if they don't share the knowledge, my job's secure, but at some point you're going to go on to another job. You're going to go on to another position. You need to share that knowledge and continue to pay it forward so the next leader can step up. I always say if I'm on vacation or if, somehow I go to another company, the ship has to keep running regardless if I'm there or not. Not saying that all of a sudden you're not the leader of the team anymore. You're not pushing things forward, but you need to create other leaders. You need to always feel if you go on vacation that the ship is going to be fine. I got people on there. I know the other leaders on my team. The ship is going to be fine. And that's what you need to continue to do throughout your career. Either that's mentorship, sponsorship, or just having those conversations. I think that's something you need to do.
Well, and it makes you better,
if
right?
We didn't know it was already a problem enough in the Bible that we see how bad it is, to your point, the job security and succession planning.
Yeah, you have to have that. I've seen great leaders who don't pay it forward, and then I see how stressed out they are because they're not sharing knowledge.
They want to control everything.
Yeah, they're trying to control everything. It's like, oh, I'll do it myself. I'll take care. But then you see how stressed out they are. But then you also see the team is not growing from it. Yeah. They're still in the same boat that they were in day one in day 200 or whatever day that is. So, yeah, you want to see that team grow. I've been lucky to work with great people. I've been lucky to mentor a lot of great people who I still have conversations with today. And jiu-jitsu helps with that. Just like, me and Tyler had the conversation, we trained. I'm paying that forward because I want to see Tyler one day become a black belt. He doesn't train at my gym, but yeah, I want to be there when he gets a black belt because I know he's going to do the same exact thing. So paying that forward.
That's cool.
And Renard, do you think some leaders are a little blind to how much it makes them better by making others better? Like these kids I train at Geyer and Marcus High over here, I better bring my game, man, or these kids will not believe in Tyler, And they all, and my favorite quote ever, I got it said to the other day, Kev, was the bald guy's got all the badges, like the 2K reference. I was like, yes, I still got it, man. But when I show up to that court, Renard, I better be on top of my game. And I believe that's how you feel too. Like either if it's jiu-jitsu or in IT, I think iron sharpens iron, I think is usually the quote. But I think some folks, I think I used to be a little blind to it. It'd be like, why would I help someone else? But man, it makes me better at the end of the day. Do you, and I wanted to ask you like more in depth, Renard, on applying jiu-jitsu to the business, because I think you carry that as a weight, to and a weapon. Can you kind of elaborate on what you do at Toyota Connected with your team and kind of how it applies with jiu-jitsu of all things? Yeah,
so I'll take a step back and start from jiu-jitsu. Okay. Jiu-jitsu does a great thing by building confidence. It makes it a lot easier for you to. If you're an introvert, you're going to change because of jiu-jitsu. I was a big introvert when I started, and probably in some aspects dependent. I'm probably still a little bit of an introvert, but it gave me a lot of confidence to want to step up and want to lead teams. So in hindsight, doing that, I do the same thing with my team. I want to create other leaders. So I think sometimes you have to push people who into uncomfortable positions. I'll say that. You have to push them into uncomfortable positions because you see greatness in them. And they might not see that in themselves, but you have to push them. And all of a sudden they step back and they say, I needed that push in order to get a lot better. I needed that throughout my career and through jiu-jitsu. There were some times I was very hard on myself in jiu-jitsu, and I needed somebody to push me a little bit harder. So now when I always say the work begins not when you start working out, but in the last 5 minutes. That's when the work begins, because it's all mental after that. You know, when that workout's about to end and you're dead tired and be like, man, 5 minutes feels like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. It's the mental that pushes you to finish. And that's where I like to see, far as the people who work on my team get pushed mentally. Look, I'm trying to make you better because I see greatness in you, regardless if you're on my team or if you go to another company, etc. I want to be part of that journey to help you get better. So that's how we push the team. And we do that in our book club. We have an IT leadership book club that we do. We do a lot of reading from that. And I can tell that those books that we read, the way we push each other on projects, etc. I've seen people change from night and day, the way they were when I started there to how they are now. Now, all of a sudden, I have someone on my team who's working on Python, etc. They weren't trying to do that in year one. They weren't even thinking about trying to do that now. But now they're seeing other avenues that they can be a leader themselves and have more knowledge and push forward in their career.
Dude, and who was the first person or coach to really push you in life?
I would have to say the first person who ever pushed me was my grandfather. Grandfather was a military man, Army, Sergeant Major. He's the one who first pushed me. And he made me understand that hard work pays off at the end of the day. Now, I will say there's a big difference between hard work when you get to the sea level. That's a lot different, because I'll tell you a story. In my career, I moved up pretty fast for the most part. I was a great individual contributor, moved up pretty fast, and then eventually I plateaued. I didn't understand how to move to an executive level, how to get to a C-suite level, etc., and had to understand that you need sponsorship, you need mentorship in order to make the move to the next level. I had to understand, and that's something I didn't know in the beginning. I used to think, like most people, you work really hard, someone eventually will see you, and then you move up. It does not work that way. So I will tell anybody who's trying to move up to an executive level, the work's there, but you need the sponsorship. You need people who are talking about you when you're not in the room. When those positions come up, you're like, hey, Tyler, man, he's going to be perfect for this CTO role that's coming up. We need to have him in here and start talking to him, or anybody else, because without that, just working hard, no one's going to just all of a sudden just move you up. But going even further back to individual contributors, I think that some individual contributors also should not be managers. You can be great at what you do, but you are terrible at managing people and leading people. It's the truth. Yeah. I've seen some people who are great ICs, work hard, complete stuff, but that's when it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The ego starts to happen. Now all of a sudden you're trying to do all the work yourself. You're not creating other leaders, etc. So I think it really needs to have, you need the technical skills, yes, but you also need the soft skills in order to lead and keep moving on in your career if you want to go into leadership.
Absolutely. I mean, how many? I saw that so many times in sales, right? I think that's kind of that dubbed internal politics, right? I fell for the same thing, Renard. I felt like my performance should speak for itself. One day somebody's going to notice, right? I was given more and more than anybody else, was a part of the 20%, doing 80% of the work, and just realized that I never was really spending time, and lack of a better word, kissing ass, playing to those egos, manipulating those egocentric individuals that all of a sudden kind of wiped this slate clean. That performance was then viewed all as one. And that's, I think, a really important point. I mean, I'll be honest. What I'm doing now, even a year ago, I would have told Tyler that he was crazy if he ever came up with the idea. I guess I view it more from I wanted to control, right? And the second that I thought I was driving the bus was where I think it got really complicated instead of limiting my expectations. And I think that's when I started to actually transition mentally to be even ready for something that I'm doing now.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to one of the things that you said, because it's something I literally was just talking to my coach and therapist yesterday about, is that there is this definitive difference between ego and confidence, right? And what we kind of discussed and what I came up with was ego is this still shot image of yourself, where confidence is kind of like a videotape, right? It's fluid. There is no start and there is no end. How would you define the difference between ego and confidence?
Oh man, I call confidence executive presence, or how I usually say it, executive swagger. That's the confidence. So it's not overconfident. You're not boastering about yourself, but you are having a presence that, hey, I can lead. I'm a leader. I always say the thing about confidence, you need to be a lion in a room with other lions. Mm-hmm. You can't be, a sheep, etc. You need to be a lion in front of other lions. You don't have to be the smartest in the room, but you need to have that presence where, hey, I command the same authority like everyone else in this room. So when I speak from the knowledge that I know, not stuff that I don't know, because I think other people try to speak on things that don't know. Speak on what you know. You're not supposed to be the smartest in the room, but understand where your strengths are. Also understand where your weaknesses are. Ego comes from a place of, to me, that, we talked about earlier, like you want to hold everything. It's my security blanket in a sense. That's where ego comes from. And I'll be honest, I think everyone gets affected by it. I got affected by it at one point in time. So that's why I always tell people there's a difference between a manager and a leader. It's two different ones. And at one point I was just a manager. And I had that same ego about, I'll do it myself. I'll take care of it. And then I needed to understand, in order for me to get better in my journey, I had to transition from that. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't easy at first. Letting go is probably one of the hardest things you can do as a leader. But once you do that and you see other people grow from it, then you understand more of where your journey is in your leadership role.
Yeah. And especially when you're in that individual contributor role, right? The way that you validate, right, or get your validation of self-worth is usually through performance. So then making that transition where now it's a group performance mentally does take a lot more self-awareness. And Tyler and I just, we posted something yesterday. It's been 5 years that we've been doing this show, and unanimously, right? Tyler and I always come out like, what is the common theme? And it's the people that really, call it emotional intelligence, call it self, but the people that have nothing to prove other than to themselves usually make the best leaders, to your point, because you get out of the way. You hire people and then you get out of the way. You provide clarity through communication and expectations, and then you see who can rise and who won't rise. And that's really gets me back to the other point that I wanted to talk about is how important in leadership is the ability to identify potential in somebody else that they can't even see themselves.
Oh, I think it's highly important. That's, I look at it like this. You're a scout as well as a leader. You're supposed to be scouting the talent, seeing who's coming in. Not everybody, what's the thing they always say? In order to get better at basketball, you got to play with better people in order to get better at it. Yep. And it's the same way when you're scouting for the next person up. Either that's with your team, it could be on another team, because when you're a little bit higher up, you start looking at the landscape a lot bigger. You don't just look at, this is my department. You start looking at, what can I do in order to affect the business and growth? If that's people, let me find the best people to come in here. Is that new technology? That could be another vendor, etc. That's another part of your job. So I think the key is to see someone who is willing to step out of their comfort zone, even when it's very scary. There's a lot of things I do. I still step out of my comfort zone and do. And I think that's one of the key things. You got to find someone who's willing to step out of their comfort zone.
Absolutely.
Even though they know for a fact it's scary for them, they're not sure about it, but they're willing to do it. That is going to be the person who's going to excel the most for it.
Yeah. And I think that majority of my life, I was like The Walking Dead, right? You get into this autopilot mode, right? And yeah, you almost want to go into the day expecting how the day will end, and that's where you're not in the present moment, right? And you're almost afraid of life. You're not really living, and so it's to that point. So many things can be happening, but if you're not really present and there mentally or aware. And that's probably one of the lessons that you probably get from jiu-jitsu. You can't do that. You have to be in the present moment. You can't be thinking about that meeting that you had at 4:00 or what you're about to have for dinner after. Do you ever see that jiu-jitsu helps you to be more in the now?
Oh man, it has to be. Just like you said, if I'm not present in jiu-jitsu when I'm training, etc., something's bad is going to happen. I'm going to get put to sleep. My arm's going to get broken, so I have to be. But jiu-jitsu puts so much in perspective for you that I always say it's being calm in darkness. Jiu-jitsu puts you in so many positions that are very uncomfortable for you. By the time you go to the office, everything is so minor after that. So when we have so many fires going on, like everybody does, I'm pretty calm in all that because I have to be. If I'm not calm as the person who's leading the team, then everybody else isn't going to be calm. I have to still be able to understand the problem, how we're going to finish it, how we're going to resolve it, even if it's a project, how are we going to make that date? I can't be the person who's hectic and freaking out. So the same thing comes with jiu-jitsu about it. Jiu-jitsu is great that you start to understand people a lot more. And meaning it doesn't matter what your title is at work, how much money you make, etc. When you step on the mat, everybody is the same. Everybody is people just with other people. And I've gotten to meet great CEOs, CIOs, executives, board members who train jiu-jitsu, and we don't talk anything about work. Most of the time, you don't find out about what someone else does until you've known them probably 6 months down the line. And you just look at them like, hey, what do you do outside of work? Be like, oh, I'm in IT too. And then all of a sudden you have this common thing about work, but it's always been about jiu-jitsu. So jiu-jitsu makes you comfortable about talking to people, just people you don't know. For me, it's 2 hours on the mat that I don't have to worry about the outside world. I step on the mat, everything else gets quiet for 2 hours, and then I can face the world very easily after that. So calmness and darkness is a big thing that I always say that jiu-jitsu can help a lot with. I recommend jiu-jitsu for anybody. It doesn't matter how old you are. I would recommend it because it takes so many attributes for what you have to do as a leader. Jiu-jitsu can help a lot. It can focus you a lot more. It helps you see the bigger picture at the end of the day. And it's helped me a lot over the years. I can tell you how many things. Pay it forward is a big thing that I do. Like I said, we talked about earlier about jiu-jitsu. Understanding that you are playing chess, not checkers.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to make the recommendation too to Tyler, your next networking event down there. Maybe you just roll out a jiu-jitsu mat to get people away from just telling you, "Hi, my name's Kevin, and I do this."
Yeah. It sparks so many conversations when you talk. I can't tell you how many people are always shocked. It was like, "Hold on, you train jiu-jitsu," but then I tell them I'm a black belt. They're like, "Hold on, you're a black belt?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a black belt in jiu-jitsu." It was like, wow, and that starts a whole nother conversation. So it's a great conversation starter if you ever need one.
Yeah, and Kevin, dude, Renard is like a magician, man. The first time I saw this guy, he took his gi and wrapped his gi around the dude's neck. And I was like, who does that, man? Like talking about chess, using your own gi to choke someone. I was like, this is like some magician Houdini stuff, man. And how slow he did it too, Kev. He came in just nice and slick and just, oh, I got you now. You know, it wasn't like a fast motion at all, but you could see in his brain. Like I was on the outside of the ring watching the mat, and he just do and game over. You know, unbelievable. And Renard, I wanted to go back real quick on that the sponsorship talk you were talking about. How do I coach the young generation to build sponsorship within their organization? Because like they are super gun ho with IC work, but they want to be a C-level person, but they are just, and it's almost cute sometimes when you talk to some of them, and they are way off on how to get there. So how did you start building sponsorship within internally with your teams going up?
I will say that it was me stepping out of my comfort zone and just talking to C-level, talking to people who are executive level, and not calling them sir or ma'am, but actually calling them by their first name and having those conversations, letting them know that, hey, you know, I'm looking to want to get into the C-level later on in my career. What steps? You know, you got to start asking questions, because if you don't ask questions, you never know. There a lot of people who are in the executive level are always open to mentorship and talking to people about how they got to that level and what they can do. I think it needs to start off, if you want sponsorship, you should not be the first thing that you ask for. Is sponsorship. You need to start off on, I would say, friendship, business level, start learning about them, learn about their background, and start having the conversations. And then sponsorship will easily flow into that. It should not be the very first conversation you have. It shouldn't be, if you're going to reach out to them on LinkedIn, you should already know some background about that person before you start talking to them. It could be, hey, I saw that you won, an award, etc. I would love to know about your journey and how you got to where you go. That's how you start those conversations, and sponsorship will just flow in very easily after that. I had to learn that over time, because just reaching out to a random executive, even on LinkedIn, is scary, because you wonder if they're even going to respond back to you. But if you take the time and learn about that person, learn the background, even if it's just awards, etc., and start off that way, sponsorship will easily come. And I can honestly say a lot of the executives that I know them based off friendship. I started friendship first, and sponsorship just flowed easily. Mentorship flowed easy because we just had conversations. And then all of a sudden they knew about me, I knew about their background, and all of a sudden they say, hey, there's some open positions here for X, Y, and Z. I've been talking about you in other rooms. And then all of a sudden you start looking shocked. Oh, thank you. You might be having dinner with them, you might be on the Zoom call, and they say, hey, I've been talking about you to these other leaders. Hey, I had a dinner last night with X, Y, and Z. I brought your name up. They're looking to talk to you on Tuesday or Wednesday. That's how those conversations start. So I would say anyone who's an IC, an individual contributor, learn about the person that you want to be a mentor, a sponsor first. Start with friendship and learning about them first before sponsorship. Sponsorship will flow organically in that conversation.
Well, Renard, I'm about to talk about you in this seminar that I'm about to keynote speak, man. It's the same thing in networking,
Yeah.
and it's amazing when it actually happens. Like this one fella, he knew that I was a husband, a dad, and a Razorback. That's all I ever said to the guy. He was like, but what are you? I'm like, that's a lot, man. I'm a hog, I'm a dad, and I'm a Razorback. And it turns out that I'm doing a big ass microservices integration to AWS for him, because one day he poked around. He's like, hey man, do you guys do this? And I'd be like, I said, I thought you'd never ask, man. I thought you just thought I was a hog and a husband, man. But that friendship is where it's at, and people don't believe me when I meet people, when I walk away from them, I'm Razorback Tyler to them. That's what I give myself a nickname. So when I text them, it's not just like, hey, I'm Tyler and I do IT stuff. It's hog white over here. just to break the ice a little bit.
Yeah.
I would even say that in the intro that me and Tyler had, Tyler reached out to me on LinkedIn, but it didn't start off as, hey, I want you on want you on the podcast. He was like, just let's talk. And all of a sudden now we train what, like a couple of Saturdays together, etc. He's a ball of energy, which I love. Even people at my gym say the same thing. And that's how it started, and that's how we are now. And that's how it should be for the most part. Start off with friendship, knowing about the person, and everything else will happen organically.
Yeah, because I feel like the elements of fear enter into relationships, especially in business, because whether they admit it or not, it's almost like this grand competition, that scarcity versus abundance mindset. And that's where Tyler and I have always focused and harped on, like, the power of love, right? That true human connection. Business should be a byproduct of it. But instead, I think a lot of people, and I'll even say with the younger generation that we're talking about, and I think I had a little bit of it. I think my expectations maybe were a little lower because just coming up middle class, like, I didn't have anybody that was working in executive roles. Mm-hmm. All the executives that I worked about just talked about how they walked on water and not what they sucked or failed at, So I was like, man, that's not me. I'm not perfect. But it also subconsciously, I started to get the idea that perfectionism was the only option, to climb that ladder or to get that. But now I'm hearing more and more, almost like these unrealistic expectations of youth. They see what they want and they want it yesterday. Or today, right? And I don't know if that's a byproduct of the immediacy economy that we live in, right? Instant gratification, or if it's just a total lack of perspective. And maybe it's the information age, Renard, right? I can find all the information out. I can now chat GPT it and get a playbook. I always was one of those people that ask questions. I've just seen, I guess, the creativity of open-ended questions diminish as well. Are you curious? Do you really want to know about that person and that journey? And are they willing to share? How do you set up proper expectations? When you are talking to that young mentor, they want to be an executive tomorrow, even though they've only been working professionally 2 years. And it's like, I don't know, like, what have you done to earn that? Like, help me understand. So I wanted to ask you that question because I'm sure in your position you get asked quite often when you're having those growth conversations.
Yeah. I always, the first thing I always ask is, what do you want to do at the end of your career, at the top? And I always tell somebody, you need to reevaluate your career every 3 to 5 years. You need to sit there and reevaluate what you plan on doing. Because going on in my career, I didn't know I wanted to be in leadership. I wanted a job at first. You get out of college, you just want a job. You're not even thinking like, hey, I want to be a leader. You're just like, I want a job. So over time, seeing the right mentors, talking to the right people, I went into management, and then working with a lot of other great leaders, then I turned into a leader after that. Mm-hmm. So I would say anybody who's starting in your career, and I'll go back. My son's just starting in his career in IT. So he's an IC right now. He's an IC working, and he's still trying to figure out where he eventually want to go to the networking, et cetera. And I tell anybody who starts off, what do you want to do in the next 3 to 5 years? Yeah. Finalize that first, and then the next 5, go after that. Break it down into bites and start chopping the tree down after that. And then that'll at least give them a focus on it. Because I think if you're just starting to be like, hey, I want to be in leadership, you got to put a lot of work into that in order to make that decision. Honestly, that might not be the decision you want to make in the next 5 to 7, even 10 years. You might not want to do that. So I think that conversation I usually have, I always start is, what do you want to do in the next 5 years?
Yeah, because I was going to say, if you ask me that question, where do you want to end your career? I think all of us say just retirement. I think that's like the real easy answer. But yeah, because I think at that stage, like you're right, at each stage of your career, if you're not reevaluating, which I think my first career took me 7 years to reevaluate and say, is this? Can I see myself retiring in this position? is so important, because that requires you to reflect. Like, what did I like? What did I not like? Am I building resentment because I didn't know what to expect and where my lines were, or how to say no? So I think that's perfect. That's a great way to look at it, instead of looking at 35 years of work. Like, okay, 3 to 5 years at a time makes it a little bit more manageable to be creative within that time frame.
And I think the people around you, too, helped me out. Like when I met Kevin Renard, I kid you not, dude, I was slinging Sims, dude, cold calling. And Kevin was like, "You're cold calling?" And I was like, "Yeah, man." And he was like, "What the hell are you doing, dude? Do you know who you are?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, Q-Radar and Splunk, dude." And I was just saying that stuff. It wasn't me, man. And honestly, I should probably be on the sideline chewing some ass with some kids on a basketball court or a football field, but I am in this position. But I do relate it to that, And I remember my dad was a coach down in Texas, and he was the one who told me not to get into coaching because the money was bad back in the 80s and 90s. Then I kid you not, like 4 years later, I was like, "Dad, the Rogers High School coach is making 6 figures." And he was like, "I know, man." I know. But Renard, I wanted to ask you a personal question. Do you think how does it feel seeing your son kind of follow in your footsteps? Is that meaningful to you? Like, that's got to feel some way.
Yeah, honestly, it's very humbling, to be honest. Because the weird thing is, and I'll tell you the story, that before I started IT, I went into sports medicine at first. Went into sports medicine. I was in college, took my first medical terminology class, and I was failing pretty bad. It probably took me 2 weeks or something in order to get a C in that class. And the teacher said, he was like, "Hey," he said, "you got to see, I'm happy for you. I'm proud of you." He said, "But you're going to fail this class." He said, he honestly told me that. He told me in the nicest way, and I appreciate that for him. He was like, "You're going to fail this class." He said, "You should drop this class and come back next year and try." And I dropped the class and went into something that I knew. The funny thing is, I never told my son that I went into sports medicine. He did that the first time. He didn't have the same outcome as me, but then he just came to me one day and he was like, "Hey, I want to go into technology. I want to go into IT." And for me as a dad, how proud I was, because I was shocked at first. And, of course, as a dad, I went around the corner, cried a little bit, so happy about it. But seeing him in his journey and where he is now, man, I'm proud of him. I want him to be better than me. I think that's what we all want for our kids, to be better than their parents. And I love seeing his journey. He asks questions every so often. It's not that many, but I always told him, I say, eventually start looking at your career in the next 3 to 5 and make a decision where you want to go. If you're happy where you are, great. But that means you got to be the best they have at that particular position at the company. So I love seeing it. It's very humbling. I'll be honest. I did not think that he would go into IT, but I always say I'm glad that I was a great role model. I asked him one time, I said, "Hopefully I was a great role model for you." And he told me one thing, he's like, you are. I said, "Hopefully I didn't mess up at any time." So I'm lucky. I'm lucky enough. I was doing well. He saw me as a good mentor and a great father for him. And I just love his journey and looking forward to see him at the C-suite one day at some major company.
Yeah, I just knew I didn't want to do what my dad did, because he would come home every night miserable, and I was like, whatever he's doing, I do not want to do that. And so he was in accounting, and I knew I was not going that route.
Yeah, I
want to go back to a couple of words, because what's really sticking to me is humble confidence, right? Mm-hmm. You talked about both, right? And I think I used to look at those as, I don't know, maybe like a chicken and the egg, what comes first. But I think they're almost like that yin and the yang that's really important to bring that humility to the ego, to keep your ego in check, while you're also confident that when going against, right, and finding an adversity, that you know that you can overcome it, whether it's as an individual or as a team. And I think that's some of the stuff that really is sticking with me from the conversation, because I think it's both, and it's not in either or. I think it's both, and how they kind of collaboratively work together. One of the things I wanted to ask, I guess, for my last question of the day, you talked about your personal evolution, right? You talked about some of these critical points within your lifetime, both personally and professionally, that kind of shaped and shifted, and you adapted, you evolved. One of the ones I wanted to go back to, though, was your manager to a leader.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a moment? Was there something that happened? Did somebody tell you you suck at this? And what motivated you to make that shift, right? To make that evolution from managing work and outcome to leading and growing and raising up other leaders?
I think for me, and what we talked about earlier, I had to let the ego go. I had to do one thing that is probably the most hardest thing in the world, and I had to let go. I had to do something that was uncomfortable, trust my team, and understand that we are successful together, not just me doing all the work, etc. And then when I did that, I could see the change. I could see my team was a lot happier. I could see that they were growing in different ways. They started asking more questions. They started becoming leaders themselves in their own right. So for me, and I think it was when I worked for a financial company, when I worked at Orange USA. I was managing there, and I was still one of those who like, I'll take care of myself. I got it. I know y'all can't do it right now. I'll do it myself. And once I changed that and started letting go, then I saw people on my team get a lot better. They got better. They got, what they say, better, stronger, faster. That's what that's what happened to the team. The team started coming up with their own ideas. So we'll sit in meetings. They have great ideas. I started listening a lot more. And I think that's one thing as a leader you have to do of a great team. Start listening and start taking what they're saying and start saying, okay, that sounds like a great idea. Okay, because again, you are not supposed to be the smartest person in the room. So the team grows. You start seeing them do a lot of personal development on their own. I started doing that. I still do that today, the personal development, having an executive coach, etc. Because I know I got to continue to get better. So I would say letting go is one of the biggest things that you can do in order to transfer from a manager to a leader.
And like you've said, there's an element of overcoming fear, right? And fear you control. And it's understandable because I think that's where your ego gets fed. It's like, okay, this is my worth. This is my validation. Look at this result. And then sharing in the result is that first hurdle that I think, I too had to overcome that. And I think that's a battle that I'll face every single day. I don't think that ego goes away, but the more I can name it Mark and tell it to shut up and get back, Mark, that really helps, especially with that internal naysayer. So once I named it and gave it a name, I now I'm able to recognize it a little bit easier.
Man, and I was going to say, how nice is it to have a leader that does listen? Sometimes it is so damn refreshing to me. Because I've had the ones where I'll say something and it's not super profound or anything, but it's going somewhere. And then the response is like in right field, and you're like, what the hell is going on? But just to be able to have that leader for me is nice, and to be one too. Yeah. To add on to someone's conversation, not just fire back what you have done or whatever. And it's so simple, but not many people do it in my experience in the last 40 years of my life. But,
I think love has something to do with that, Ty. I think because I'll even say people on my team, like I always ask now my question, what did you hear? Because even people that don't have a title, they're also not listening to you.
Mm-hmm. You got to instill confidence in they need to be confident in you as well. You be confident in the team. I think a lot of the things we go through is imposter syndrome. It pops up on me every so often. But I've learned to really listen to my team and understand. Here's the thing I always do with my team. If they come up with a great idea, give me the reason why we should switch in the direction we're going. And give me concrete data why we need a switch. You do that, I'll be like, okay, let's move forward with that. Because I think if you have data to support that, then it makes it easier. Because I used to be a person who would come up with an idea and I would give somebody a summary basically. And it was like, I need more information than that. So I go very detailed, especially when I'm in front of, a quarterly meeting, etc. Let me go into detail of why we need to do this. So that way, someone taught me a long time ago, and this goes to storytelling when you're doing PowerPoints, etc. If you put the information on the PowerPoint where they don't have to ask a question, put enough data while you're talking that they don't have to ask any questions about it. The more questions they ask, that means you're not explaining it well enough.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned over time.
Don't read off the slide, please.
Don't do not read off the slides. The slides are not, if no one knows this, the slides are not for you as the presenter. The slides are for the audience.
Yeah.
You should know every slide backwards and forwards. You should be able to skip from 1 to slide 10 and know everything in between, because you're the one who built it. Yeah. You built the slide deck. You should know that. So the slides are never for you. It's to tell a story for the audience so they can understand why they need to care.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that I've just found too, Renard, that consensus. Where instead of a summary, those points, right? Mm-hmm. You'll find people that just like to complain but never come with a solution, and it's like you're almost addicted to that, right? But if it doesn't come with a consensus, and it doesn't mean that all ideas are good ideas or all ideas are bad ideas, but we got to come to a consensus. It makes that change management process and adoption so much easier.
Agreed. We're working at Toyota Connected. Everything is fast. I mean, fast. We go from conversation to testing in the same day. So I deal with a lot of people who PhDs, etc. You're talking about a tech automotive company. So I have to be very detailed on why we need to do something. I can't go generalize it. I can't say, man, I think this is a good idea because, it's Tuesday. I think it's a good idea. But no, I have to be very detailed for the executive team, everyone else to understand why we need to do that. And like I say, presenting that, it's for the audience to say, why should I care? And that's what you're presenting to them. So I'm very detailed. I make sure my team is very detailed, especially if they come up with an idea. And I ask the same thing. Okay, would you bet your career on it if we went this route? I need you to be that confident. That confident, because the thing about it, my manager or my director, my boss, he says the same thing to me. It's like, hey, would you bet your career on it? So I have to be that confident in what I'm presenting that I would bet my career on it. And usually it's either yes or no. If I don't feel confident about it, I'm not going to even say I need to go back, I need to reevaluate it, etc. But if I feel confident, we'll have those conversations.
Dude, I love it. And Renard, thanks for being on the show, man. I know we're wrapping up right now, but I can't thank you enough, not just for being on the show, but for walking back in your journey with Jiu-Jitsu and teaching a white belt a few tricks, man. It's much needed, and I can't tell you how much I thank you for it. And you make me even want to pay it back on the basketball court as well. You really sparked up an energy in me. And I was already doing that a little bit, but I've really, really picked up my game with these kids over here. The ones that are, guess what? They're willing. Anytime I ask a kid to, make 300 to 500 threes a day, and they don't blink and say, yes, sir, those are the ones that, guess what? That I'm probably going to invest a lot in. But I just want to, sign off right now. I got to jump to a little seminar here. And Renard, I'll be texting you, man, and I'll see you Saturday.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you for having me here. I appreciate y'all. Tyler, like I said, it's been great. Kevin as well, it's been great. So yeah, anytime.
Appreciate it, Renard. Thanks so much for the wisdom. Appreciate it.
Yeah.